if you build a payment product for stablecoins and you build a global payment product, you have one choice, and that is to be very focused on USDT.
Why are institutions so interested in stablecoins? Is it about the yield? Is it about the use case?
You have $215 billion ish in stablecoins right now.
Welcome back to the Rollup, your home for technical talks and open conversations that shape the modular future. Nothing on today's show is to be construed as financial advice. You can see our full disclosures list at therollup.co/ventures. Sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode after a quick word from some of our awesome partners.
Innovating finance, global, institutional, and on-chain. Deep liquidity to drive capital efficiency. Now maximize yields on institutional-grade liquid staking with METH. Unlock $1 trillion of capital via Bitcoin. All of this secured by Mantle's treasury of billions in stables and ETH capital pools. This entire ecosystem is coordinated by a vast network of seasoned VCs that are aiming to create the next generation of banking and financial technology. This is Mantle.
All right, Paul, we're in Hong Kong, Consensus Week. Welcome in. I know you just got in. How you feeling?
Good. Still fighting European jet lag, but generally good.
Yeah. Well, it's your first time on the roll. Obviously, we met just basically 2 months ago or a month ago in St. Moritz for CFC. Had a great event there. A lot of institutional people there, and also here. I think that's the current trend of crypto, and we'll talk a lot about stablecoins today, about what you guys are building at Plasma. But first time on the show, so who is Paul? And why are you building in crypto?
Sure. Yeah. So I used to play poker way back in the day, and had kind of much smarter, much more visionary friends than me, and kind of talked me into doing crypto. And started very much on the kind of on-chain side of things. Went through like the very early days of like the Ether Delta and IDEX days. Lost infinite ETH on that, by the way. Should have never touched either of those. And then kind of went through like really all of DeFi really coming into being as a concept, and then becoming pretty large and pretty quickly, and was very active kind of on chain throughout the early days. And I don't know if DGen score means anything to you. I was pretty high up there.
Yeah,
I think I was top 10 at some point.
That's pretty good.
So really kind of spent my time in like the very deep trenches, and then started a company called Alloy, building IMS, PMS software on kind of the institutional side of things, and worked with lots of kind of large institutional players in building IMS and PMS software, mostly for kind of the liquid crypto side of things, and now doing Plasma, which is a payments specific chain, specifically geared towards stablecoins, and so that's kind of the somewhat random arc of how I ended up here.
And so my co-founder Robbie I met him at the university Bitcoin Club freshman year, which was June of 2017. I had just briefly been introduced to Bitcoin prior to then. And then we kind of reconnected after in 2020 to start the Rollup. It was formerly known as DeFi Slate. And your college roommate or friend is also working with you on Plasma now.
Yes. My very good friend, his like pseudonym is Lucid. We used to live together in uni, and spent many long nights and early mornings together. It just kind of, it was also like the peak DeFi time kind of coincided with the peak COVID time. So we were kind of locked into our apartment anyways, and spent a lot of time together. And he then kind of also ended up going in a very, very crypto native direction, and now very happy to kind of be working with him again.
Yeah,
it's like old friends always kind of come back.
Yeah.
I'm very happy.
I kind of have a rule of like, don't do business with friends, but the relationship started with Robbie around crypto, and still here with Lucid. So it's like it was a natural path. It was like, I don't know who else I would have been like, let's do this together, right?
I think it's actually great to do business with friends, because you have like a deep kind of trusting relationship, and I think that is, especially in like small teams, but like it's like a very like we just spent the last 2 weeks in Switzerland together, like all like in one house, just like
that's awesome,
getting stuff done, and like you end up spending such an incredible amount of time together that like you need to work with people you like would hang out outside of work. Otherwise you just become miserable. And so I think that's very much also kind of the what we're trying to do at Plasma is to like hire people we would also like to like spend
The
16 hours a day with, because it's kind of inevitably what happens, right? And so no, I'm very happy about kind of the current team setup.
We have a very remote first work setup in crypto naturally, just because of how global it is. But when you do go on the on-sites, it's like, it does feel like two things. One, you get a lot more done, and you get a lot more cohesion. And then similarly, on the other side, when you go to conferences and you actually shake hands and sit down with people, the process of like BD, if you will, accelerates so much further, and there's so much more urgency in getting things done when you meet people in person.
100%. I think the EV of just getting on a plane. I was actually speaking to Vance at Framework, who led out around, and he was like, look, like the EV of like just getting on a plane and meeting people and actually kind of shaking hands is incredible. And I couldn't agree more.
Well, glad that you're here. Glad that you made it. You're at a good spot, because I put out a key takeaways tweet like 2 days ago. Been here for like 4 or 5 days. And it said that there's a ton of institutional based interest in stablecoin oriented projects. Just yesterday, Animoca and Standard Chartered announced they are working together on the Hong Kong dollar. Here.
Actually, I met Standard Chartered right before this. They're doing some very cool and very interesting stuff.
Yeah. So that is just the epitome of what's happening here. Why did you choose to build in stablecoins? Like, why are institutions so interested in stablecoins? Is it about the yield? Is it about the use case? Is it the lower cost margins on different businesses? Is it cross-border payments? Or like, what is it that institutions are so interested about when it comes to stablecoins?
I think it's very easy to grasp. I think it's very easy to kind of see the like very immediate value in it. The way I view it, I think crypto has kind of two main categories of like massive product market fit, maybe 3. I think like Bitcoin is kind of in its own category. I think Bitcoin is kind of very much kind of one as an asset, like as just digital gold. I think that's somewhat separate from like the rest of actual to an extent. And then you have gambling, which like is
for sure
speculation, gambling, whatever you want to call it, 24/7, massive PMF, like no effect to that category at all.
Libra.
And Libra was a bit of a shit show from like what I saw from the outside. And then you have stablecoins and like actual kind of cross-border remittance flows, and just basically tokenized cash.
I think of it as a barbell. It's like you've got speculation and stablecoins. Everything in the middle is still trying to figure out where to go.
Yes, and I think like there's a whole bunch of very, very interesting stuff kind of that doesn't fit into those two categories. And I think a lot of that is also going to work at massive scale. But just looking at like the data now, I think those are really the kind of two main kind of at scale winners.
So let's zoom in on stablecoins. I'm an institution. I have little crypto exposure and knowledge. Why are stablecoins appealing to me?
I think you have different use cases, right? But like, it is like, why are stablecoins appealing to me? I think there's a couple of different answers to that, right? I think on one hand, really just having incredibly efficient and fast kind of payment flow that settles immediately and is kind of provably actually settled. I think it's like, if you've ever kind of used stablecoins to like send money to someone, it's just such a superior experience to anything else. I think that is like a very kind of tangible use case, especially now kind of also on the commodity side of things. For example, we see kind of a lot more of these kind of cross-border trade financing type products also kind of move to USDT and USDC. And so I think you just have such an incredible amount of kind of global payments flow, and stablecoins are really small right now. Basically, I think it's like easy to forget that you have $215 billion ish in stablecoins right now, which sounds like a really large number,
but compared to the money,
it really is
something, right?
Like it's really like it's incredibly tiny, and I think that's kind of held back by regulation in many different ways. I think that's changing in a massive way now, especially in the US, right? I don't know if you've seen kind of the stablecoin bill drafts, all of them kind of basically establishing a framework for kind of really using stablecoins in global commerce. And I think as soon as that happens, you just have kind of floodgates opening to kind of actually have stablecoins, tokenized cash, kind of be deeply intertwined into kind of the TradFi kind of payments rails, basically.
Yeah, and I think another perspective to add here is that my mental model is stablecoins outside of institutional use cases, they democratize the access to US dollars. One, however, there's still a hidden cost to stablecoins that I think people don't realize, which is that when you're holding stablecoins as a user, the companies are actually earning yield on the stablecoins, and they're making money off you effectively, but you get access to the dollar. However, if you go and then take the dollar that you're holding, and you can go in Circle, and their Coinbase is offering you a couple percent. Tether you can put into Aave, you can put into DeFi markets, and you democratize access to not just the dollar, but to treasury yields on the dollar in a safe manner. And that, to an underbanked population, is massive.
It's incredibly valuable. And I think it's also like tough to underestimate how kind of strategically good that is for the US to kind of establish
that as well.
USD dominance globally. And so I think actually like both Tether and Circle are kind of very much I think they align incredibly well with kind of the US's kind of
goals,
macro interests.
Yes, because there's a thesis. There's like a dollar milkshake theory, which is one thesis that's somewhat applicable, but there's an economic situation that happens when the demand for stablecoins thus increases the demand for USD as an asset. Is like how do we think? What's the right way to think about what's the mental model for the economic demand for holding stablecoins, and how that reflects on like US dollar in relation to other fiat currencies that aren't as powerful from stablecoins? Or maybe it's not that deep, it's not that impactful yet, but like it could get there.
Yeah, I mean, look, the like vast majority of like global trade settles in USD, especially like the like large notional trades. Like it's like the one current, like there's a reason why it's so dominant, and that's also a large part of the reason why stablecoins are so dominant in South America and in Africa to an extent, and then like basically in a lot of different places where on one hand access to US banking is challenging, and on the other hand you just have challenges with local currency that have massive inflation or have like very opaque systems basically of actually accessing kind of conversion to other currencies, and you just have so much complexity kind of embedded in that. And it's not a coincidence that like those other places where also stablecoins have like the most usage. And so I think it's really, especially USDT, but USDC as well, is kind of a very easy way to access kind of a US dollar kind of bank account in the end globally.
Yeah,
and that is in the interest of the US government, basically. And so I think that like incentives are incredibly well aligned basically between stablecoin issuers and the US in the end.
So totally agree. And I think what's even more so happening now is that Tether is actually becoming a larger beneficiary of this trend as of the last 18 months than USDC, in the sense that when Tether was like, I remember back in the days, I would read Bitfinex's Medium blog posts about how Tether is unbacked and it's going to blow up. And then USDC kind of came around and everyone was like, we got our saving grace. Like, it's backed by Coinbase, public company, or IPO happened, balance sheet. But now Tether is just absolutely exploded again and is ahead of Coinbase and Coinbase's USDC, and is like looking that it's going to end up being like the stablecoin of the world in a sense, partially for a couple reasons. And I'm curious to understand from your perspective this dynamic as to your relationship with Tether and, kind of why you're choosing to build around Tether, because Tether is not necessarily set up in the US. And so they have a different set of guidelines that they are operating in. Now, there is a stablecoin act that's coming in that will kind of level the playing field a bit more, but there's been some sort of like geo arbitrage that's happened, as well as Tether's adoption in Latin America has, like, Tether is focused globally, while I feel like USDC kind of focused more in the States in terms of adoption. So maybe just put the pieces together here. Why has Tether kind of, I mean, by market cap, it's surpassed USDC, but I think even by supply it has as well? You can fill in the pieces here. What happened? Like, why did Tether kind of gain ground, and where do we go from here?
Yeah. I view USDT and USDC as somewhat distinct products, basically. And USDC is very much kind of the domestic dollar product, basically in the US and in Europe to an extent. And USDT is very much the kind of export kind of euro dollar, basically. And my personal view is I think the kind of TAM for the latter category is like orders of magnitude larger. I think like US dollar domestically is a much smaller market than US dollar globally.
Like that economic size is much less than the economic size of global dollar trade.
100%. And if you look at the kind of actual kind of real activity, USDT dominates by like an incredible margin. Probably it's tough to kind of estimate, but like 80-85% of like real actual kind of both consumer and business usage is USDT denominated and not USDC. You have a lot of kind of idle supply sitting on Coinbase and on other exchanges for USDC, where I think is like it's a fantastic company, Circle, and they're going to IPO soon, and they're like they've made some of the right choices. I still think that like on the actual, like if you build a payment product for stablecoins and you build a global payment product, you have one choice, and that is to be very focused on USDT.
And so that's why you think Tether has kind of started to kind of surpass, is because it was more focused on this global supply.
It's always like no surpassing happened. It's just always been north.
And that's in my head then.
No,
in my mind it was like Tether was kind of like in this spot, and then USDC, but now it's like very clear.
No, I think especially from a usage perspective, like it's always been incredibly Tether dominated, and I don't think that changes in a meaningful way, because it's such a networks effects business too, right? We're like a payments product, but like if I send you money, and I have USDC, but you can't accept it, then like that is a useless product, right? And then so you need, like, all of these systems are like very interconnected, and then Tether is at some point basically is very Lindy now. Where
most definitely
you go to, I mean, I spent a week in El Salvador a couple of weeks ago, and like you go to this kind of smaller kiosk and you can pay with USDT, right?
As well.
And Turkey, same thing, and like Brazil, Argentina, everywhere, like you just have kind of USDT is accepted everywhere, and it's kind of the one kind of standard asset that everyone. Thailand, and so that is such a massive advantage. Just kind of be entrenched in kind of all of these kind of local, in all of these kind of local communities and processes. That is incredibly tough to go up against.
Yeah.
Redstone is DeFi's modular oracle, supporting over 100 clients on over 50 chains and offering 1,000 assets. Redstone is the leader for Bitcoin staking and yield-bearing assets. They offer the most robust, customizable price feeds available in any model. Join the Redstone exhibition today.
Okay, so Tether and USDT and USDC are, I like to say Tether because it can get kind of confusing. It's hard to hear sometimes, but Tether and USDC are both ERC20 tokens.
Yeah.
They were born on the
not only, right? I mean, you have TRX and then you have
etc.
Yeah.
But they were born on Ethereum. I think most of the Tether demand has been on Tron recently in terms of payments. So you're building Plasma, which is what I like to call a purpose-built chain for payments. I think that's what you guys are calling it, specifically for usage of Tether. So maybe you could explain why we need a dedicated blockchain for this, and why this current setup is either inadequate or isn't fulfilling the needs of a certain customer base or client or market that you have in mind that is going to be using Plasma.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid question. It's very interesting if you look at like where outstanding USDT supply is right now. And it's incredibly dominated by Mainnet Ethereum and then by Tron. Those are really the kind of two heavyweights. Everything else is somewhat subscale. And Ethereum isn't really viable for like actual kind of payment flow, right? I think for like somewhat obvious reasons. It's just it's expensive.
I like it for
holding inventory. Sure, yeah.
If I'm sending you like 8 figures of Tether,
You probably don't care if it's $7 or if it's
like
2 cents.
It's still cheaper than a wire transfer as long as gas is down.
That's very true. But I think to like actually build a payment system on like massive scale,
Ethereum
is just not viable.
Okay, so
right?
that's Ethereum,
and I think Tron has its very own set of challenges, and it's actually not that cheap anymore. And I think also you have a certain level of discomfort in kind of
risk as well.
In just using like I would personally not feel amazing about like having insane inventory on Tron personally. Like if I think holding 8 figures on Tron is just
0 on Tron today.
Yeah, I've used Tron quite a bit, and it's just not. And I think like we're hearing similar things from like the large mint redeem entities who are like somewhat uncomfortable kind of holding inventory on Tron. And so I think to me it's very obvious that like neither of the two very dominant ones.
Expensive, slow chain that's good for like maybe large scale payments, and then we have this chain that's kind of, you know, a bit more centralized, has some history behind it, and, you know, let's just say consumers may not be that comfortable using it, and it's also dominated by like the Eastern world. So we're kind of having like these two kind of both not ideal.
Yes,
are working for now.
I think that's broadly accurate. But Tron is also just like fully like legacy technology, right? I mean, it's like a 2015, 16, 17 like vintage chain, right? And like you now have very different capabilities of kind of building very fast, very cheap kind of transactions and like.
Okay, let's segue. Then what is how have you guys thought about building Plasma then in like this purpose-built manner for payments? I'm like, maybe what is required of a chain? Let's start here. That makes stablecoin payments great. Like what are the key properties, and then how have you guys built that in?
Yeah, I mean, I think being fast and cheap is kind of it's a necessary but not sufficient condition to win. Like I think every chain is going to be fast and cheap, right? And like and you then have kind of the extremes. We have like the monads and mega ETHs, which just like very focused on like being the fastest and the cheapest. I think that's a very viable path to focus on. I think it's kind of table stakes to be fast and cheap
in the future.
You can't
win now. It's like it's commoditized, and like maybe not commoditized is the right word, but it's table stakes. Yeah,
100%. And so, given that we're very focused on the stablecoin and specifically kind of payment flow side of things, we can make a very different set of choices that like a monad or a mega ETH couldn't, and that is both from like an architecture standpoint, but it's also from a kind of go-to-market strategy, like what we care about perspective. On the technical side of things, like I said, fast and cheap is kind of a given anyways, but then you can build a lot of kind of stablecoin and payment specific features in as well.
Do you mind diving into a bit of the technicals? Like
sure,
like what's like what the architecture, how you guys do consensus and execution would be sweet.
Yeah, so we have a fully kind of custom built consensus that is BFT fast out stuff based similar to Monad actually, but with some kind of crucial changes that like are for like this one specific purpose, where we have fully gasless USDT transfers. You can send money from A to B without having. You don't need a secondary gas token. You don't need. It's free basically, and we do that by like doing some pretty kind of deep customizations on the consensus side of things, and then having some basically a custom set of validators kind of specifically geared towards doing like, transfer transactions. I think that is really what like the bulk of the kind of activity is in stablecoins. It's just sending money from A to B, and then I think especially for the payment side of things, privacy and confidentiality is a major factor. Like if I send you money, ideally you don't see my entire financial history as a result of that, and so I think there's kind of creative ways to solve that. Like you have to be somewhat careful to kind of stay compliant and to like not sort of veer in the tornado cash direction and so that's kind of been somewhat challenging to work around. But I think that there's also solutions there, and so really what we care about is kind of having the greatest possible kind of end user experience on the payments side of things, and getting there by being fast and cheap, having free transfers. Liquidity is obviously kind of a major factor. Well, like all of this is a network effect, right? And then I think kind of just given how commoditized just kind of blockchain, like providing block space, I think is used to be a fantastic business.
Yeah, no, it's no longer.
I think that is compressed meaningfully. And so it's really like Solana isn't winning just because it's fast and cheap. Solana is winning because there's a vibrant ecosystem of like interesting things to do. And I think that's also broadly how we like look at the world. But like just having this, I think it's naive to assume that like you just build something and like people are going to like show up and just like build stuff on it, and you like incentivize 47 different uni v2 forks to be built on your chain. That's a viable path. Maybe it's very much not the path we're taking. I think you have to be very focused and like actually have like a tangible like reason for existing.
I'd say it's viable 3 years ago, but I think like Kenny and I were talking about how lowering the barrier to entry for new chains accelerates the competition as well as accelerates experimentation.
Yes,
which means that what used to work won't work. Also, in addition to that, with different forms of abstracting away chains themselves and just operating in a much less like chain-centric environment.
Yes,
the best products will win.
Yes,
the deepest liquidity, the best execution, the best applications will rise to the top by form of aggregation of UX. So there's some interesting points there.
No, I mean it's incredibly easy to just like build a generic chain.
Yeah,
I mean like
it
takes you 2.5 hours and like $2,000 to like have that like an OP stack chain, right? It's very easy,
right? It's not you don't need to raise 10 million to launch a chain anymore.
Yeah,
you know if you're building something very high tech and specific, right, with a good use case, like obviously you guys raise quite a bit. There's still market demand, but if there's no more market demand for like another L2, yes, a general purpose chain like raise, it's just not going to happen.
I think it's a solved issue to an extent. And so I think we don't want to kind of resolve solved issues.
So zooming back in, nitpicking here, if you guys have no gas fees on USDT transfers, excuse me, is Tether only, right? Effectively,
it's for USDT only.
It's for USDT. Then how do you prevent spam? That's a silly question, but like, how do I just like, I'm just going to spam the network and just, yeah.
That's a very valid question. Basically, we have a kind of, we have two sets of validators, and one of them only kind of doing the kind of transfer logic, and there's a process to kind of prioritize transactions and kind of do like you can kind of segment transactions into like being real and being not real. And there's a very long paper I can send it to you after this on kind of doing that. It's relatively complex and also kind of out of my own capability of explaining to be frank. But that's the high level.
So you have one validator set to achieve consensus amongst the chain itself, and then you have another validator set to enable the consensus of the fast or of the cheap or of the free USDT transfers.
It's conceptually really very similar to what Hyperliquid is doing.
Okay.
On their kind of EVM, where they kind of have basically the kind of small block and large block logic, and then one is fast cheap and the other one is kind of solar, but has like a different set of properties basically, and I think that is very much the kind of way to build chains now. I think you kind of have to I think different transactions, like filtering them and having like different kind of sets of properties and inherent in them makes a ton of sense.
You know, it's a parallelized, but it's not parallelized in terms of like all transactions are entering the same highway. It's like there's multiple highways
exactly
that transactions can go into. And
yeah, that's yeah. You explain it much more elegantly than I do. So it's a very good way of putting it.
Okay, so we're looking at the landscape here. Ethereum, Tron, both ERC or Ethereum oriented. Tron's kind of like an Ethereum fork, effectively. But you guys are doing this through Bitcoin. So what does that mean? Like, are you guys inheriting Bitcoin security to enable your validator set? Are you like a Bitcoin? I mean, we won't get into the terminology of like L1, L2 sidechain, but like, what is the Bitcoin relevance here?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think like ultimately the kind of semantics between sidechain, L1,
Yeah.
lines get blurry. I mean, just spoke to Kane and was like, is it an L1? Is it a sidechain? And like, well,
Yeah.
whatever you want it to.
So you're inheriting some security from Bitcoin.
Yeah. So on one hand, we have native Bitcoin Bitcoin bridging, so you can bridge Bitcoin to Plasma, and then also you can stake Bitcoin basically in the consensus. Like Plasma is a POS based chain, and then also we publish state proofs to Bitcoin, and it's kind of always have like Plasma state basically is kind of broadcast and recorded on Bitcoin, and in theory you can reconstruct kind of Plasma state from the Bitcoin L1.
Yeah.
It's very, I mean, I don't know how much like you've spent in like the technical Bitcoin space, but I mean, there's massive debate on covenants and
Yes.
BIP 347 and those types of things. And I think a lot of people are betting on covenants making it to Bitcoin, which would enable native multisig and basically make like true rollups and L2s on Bitcoin possible. And I think like we kind of have to separate on like what I think would make sense and what I think is likely to happen. I actually think covenants are a great idea and like should make it into Bitcoin Core.
Yeah.
At the same time, I believe the like probability of it actually happening is pretty low, and so we're very much building on the assumption that like there's likely not going to be like massive fundamental changes on the Bitcoin Core side of things, and that means you're kind of on the Bitcoin side of things at least, very much building products with like two hands tied behind your back basically, and
you can't wait, right? Like there's BitVM happening. There's BitVM 2 now, and there's OPCat. But like if you just sit there up and with your with your hands behind your back, you're not helping anybody. You're not bringing any value to the world. So
I mean, I think incredibly like I mean the BitVM team and also the kind of Taproot wizards and then like CatVM is incredibly cool. For example, I think that is incredibly hard, and I have like immense respect for what they're building.
Yeah.
I still think that like the covenants bet is likely a losing one.
Yeah.
And like look, I mean, I might be wrong on this.
Yeah, but I think Bitcoiners value immutability a lot.
Yes. And rightfully so. I think like
right.
that is fully right. I think you're now seeing kind of this emergence of like a real ecosystem on Bitcoin, right? But you have Babylon and you have Lombard, and you're seeing like actual demand for like using Bitcoin productively. And I think that's also just very much at the beginning. Well, like you have just so much capital in Bitcoin kind of fully idle. And I think there's a very clear path to like also
DeFi and
100%.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of incredible teams building kind of Bitcoin native DeFi.
Yeah. So curious about your kind of go-to-market, your customer, how you're going to get Plasma in the hands of people. And this is going to kind of segue into your business model, mainnet token, etc. Like how are you going to take Plasma and because, right, so the thing with Ethereum and Tron is that they're in all the centralized exchanges.
Yes.
They're in all of, large players around the space. So there's a certain like Lindy effect, a certain moat that they have there.
100%.
How are you going to make Plasma this chain for Tether? And how are you going to bring that into the market, whether it be Asia, US, globally? What's your plan to do that? And then can kind of segue that into your business model and to kind of what's coming.
Sure. I think like the go-to-market is very much kind of, I think it's two different sides to it. On one end, you have kind of the crypto native side of things, which is kind of the typical just kind of chain go to market to an extent, but like you want to attract liquidity and like you want to attract kind of great people to like build in around on top of your chain. That's definitely something that we also kind of think about. I think it's going to be very focused. Like we're working with a couple of fantastic teams that are like very much kind of stablecoin and payments focused, as opposed to like we're not optimizing for having 150 protocols on day one. We would much rather have like 5 fantastic ones where like you have like actual kind of an actual kind of value to anyone who uses it. And then you have the kind of local quote unquote ground game basically, and been spending a lot of time in kind of the South America, like El Salvador, Argentina, like incredibly interesting places for that. But then also Turkey, as you say, and just kind of finding ways to entrench Plasma into those local payment flow processes, basically. And I think that is a very different go-to-market. I think that's a frankly much slower one. I don't think we have any, like, we're not going to win in like a meaningful way day one, basically, on like the consumer-facing local side of things. I think we can win that over time, and so I've been spending a lot of time on kind of going to Turkey next week, for example, to kind of meet with a couple of the local players there, and then you also have like a lot of local infrastructure on kind of the centralized exchange side of things, and I think incentives there are also very much on moving off of Tron, because that's all like a tail risk to take, and also like an operational expense consideration.
Yeah. Then the last thing here was, how are you guys going to generate revenue? What is your business model here? What's this like path to sustaining this thing? And then I guess, what's coming next?
Sure. I mean, like Plasma is going to be fully decentralized. And so like we're not a kind of equity-based company that like has like we're not charging 20 bips on like payments volume or something like that. That is very much not what I think makes sense here. And so we're really interested in building this in a very distributed, very decentralized way, basically. And also kind of handing it over to the community in some fashion gradually. And so the same business model that kind of any blockchain has, basically.
And what's the road ahead here to Mainnet, and to what's coming? Any alpha for the community, for our listeners?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, so Mainnet is going to be live in Q2, most likely. It's always like building chains and doing it well, and like being security focused just takes time, even for teams with infinite resources and like infinite very sharp people. I'm working on it, and so Q2 provisional on like things going the way I hope they go, basically. Might be like Q2.
Awesome, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy.
Great conversation.
Appreciate it.